that, please a warm welcome for Melissa, everybody. Let's hear it.
I can get this out of here and put this behind me. So, can chaos ever be a good thing? I am running down Beijing's largest shopping street, Wangfujing, and the Chinese police are gaining on me because I am wearing a rented wedding dress, high heels that are not mine, and I'm 3 months pregnant. I had spent the morning shooting scenes for this TV series that I'm doing, but this crazy dash down the street is happening in real life. It's not part of the show. We had been filming all morning this wedding scene on the steps of one of the only, this is a theme tonight, Catholic churches in Beijing. But our producer, this goofy Belgian guy who was usually too busy hitting on someone to actually do his job, hadn't gotten any sort of permit for us to actually film at this church, and I guess he wasn't familiar that China's not a place you mess around with things like this. This was not the only work day that was like this for me on this TV series. Now, from the outside, it looked incredible. It was called Modern English. And it was on 7 days a week across all of northern China. Tens of millions of people learned how to speak English watching this show every day. There's a generation of Chinese people who speak English with a little bit of a Long Island accent, and it's completely my fault. But even though this was the biggest acting job I'd ever had to date, and strangers would come up to me on the street and recognize me, behind the scenes, this show was a mess. I thought I was prepared when I showed up there because I'd spent a few years before that in New York doing movies and TV, but I didn't realize that on an American movie set, everything is so locked down and so carefully planned. Nothing can go wrong. In the late 90s, if you guys watched any of the original Law and Order, very often when it was that moment when Sam Waterston very purposefully would run up the steps of the big courthouse in Lower Manhattan talking about the case he was about to deal with inside, there'd be a woman, often me, who didn't get paid very much because she had no lines, but I'd be sitting on the courthouse steps and I'd have my newspaper, because it was the 90s, and my turkey sandwich, and I would have to look like I was this person on my lunch break eating my lunch while he rushed by, but there was somebody whose whole job was to be right off camera and make sure that I never took a bite out of my sandwich in case they cut together a couple different shots of Sam and there might be some continuity issue. They often even had a spare turkey sandwich in case I did take a bite. In China, it was like the Wild West. In fact, at one point, it was almost like the Wild West. I did a movie that was set in 1910, and I arrived at the set one day, and the only stage direction I got was, make sure you don't get trampled by the horses. At one point, I was cast to play Margaret Thatcher in this big, like, the country's biggest TV network movie about Deng Xiaoping. I'm Margaret Thatcher. I'm supposed to be negotiating the Hong Kong handover. And at one point, what actually happened with her in 1979 was that she fell down these massive stone steps basically onto Tiananmen Square. And so the day we're about to shoot this, again, I'm in high heels that aren't mine in a ridiculous dress, and I'm told to just fall down the steps in one take. And I've got nobody to catch me because the only people with me are these two really nervous Russian grad students who've been hired to play my diplomatic entourage, and they don't speak any English and they hardly speak Chinese, so nobody can tell them to catch me. All of my work days were like this, and in the beginning I was very uncomfortable, but I started to realize that I kind of loved it because I didn't know what every day was going to bring. And this tolerance for chaos ended up being really helpful because by the end of the beginning of 2003, when I'm finally leaving China, I'm 7 months pregnant. I'm on my way here to Pittsburgh because my husband is in Baghdad working as a war correspondent, and the SARS epidemic has erupted in China. So now suddenly, I don't know if he's going to get home for the birth of this first baby we're having, and I don't know if we're ever going to get to go back to this place that has become our home, which we love, where I have this crazy job that now I can't live without. But thank you. But that ability to deal with chaos ended up being a good thing, because the next year or so was pretty crazy. And as we've all figured out, the past few years have been pretty crazy. And I think what a lot of us are realizing is that I know you get taught when you're growing up that you're supposed to lock everything down and get your life really organized so nothing can go wrong. But like we've seen in the past few years, And like happened to me just now with that noise, you never know what's gonna happen, right? I mean, things happen no matter what. And so sometimes I think seeking out a little bit of chaos can kind of be a blessing, because then when the chaos you weren't looking for shows up, you kind of know what to do. Thank you.
Melissa, everybody!